Hello everybody, this is Locke and I. Welcome back to another video on the Grey Build YouTube channel. And today we're going to be taking a comparison look at both of Ninjago's Combo Mech sets. Now, recently I reviewed the Zane's Ultra Combo Mech set, which you see here, but back when I started my channel, I started by reviewing Core Wave sets from the first Ninjago Core Wave. And among those was this, the Ninja Combo Team vehicle, which pretty much just has one vehicle for each of the original Ninja from the pilot season 20 from 2011 Ninjago. Now, this vehicle, I should state beforehand, I made this review a long time ago, so my opinion has changed a little bit on this over time. And now that I have the newer one, I now also have some new opinions based on that as well. You'll also see that I've modified the bottom here on the legs here. The original actually didn't have anything aside from Zane and a place to place one of the little Woobot robots that came in the set. But I decided it would probably be better if Pixel were in the mech with Zane, because that feels like something that would make a more equalized look on the legs, and it makes perfect sense in the vehicle form as well. So I've just basically mirror built what Zane's leg was to build a spot for Pixel to sit. And it's pretty easy to do. You don't need a lot of parts, but it's something that I just did because I felt like it would work. But now let's talk about the comparison with these two. Now, both of these use a very similar color scheme, surprisingly, and I think it works pretty well for what they're trying to go for. They all use red, white, and dark blue in places around it, albeit in some places more than others, and each mech uses it differently. And the black that's used for the arms on the original mech from the Core Wave still kind of looks like there's some black on the new one as well, I guess. So you could kind of say that that was brought over too. And Cole is included in the newer set as well, given that he doesn't really have a place to ride, though. He's not in this video. We won't be taking a look at minifigures or side builds for this video, just to compare the actual mechs. So, functionality of these mechs. How much do they actually pose, and how do they look when they're just standing? This is actually pretty much... I'm going to have to give this one to the new one in terms of the posability, but in terms of overall looks when you just have it in a pose, I think the original one from Core is a little bit better. Additionally, the height of the one from the Core mechs and specifically the longer legs on that mech definitely make a taller and more majestic or powerful looking appearance, which is pretty awesome. Now, you'll also notice that the newer mech focuses mainly on having two arms and incorporating each vehicle seamlessly, whereas the old one, you can clearly see where each of the vehicles is. Like, you can clearly see Zane is the legs, Kai is the torso of the mech with the two inner arms, and Cole is the outer arms, and Jay's is at the top or on the back as well. Now, with the newer mech, everything pretty much looks seamless, aside from the fact that Ryu is hanging out on the top, which I think is a very cool inclusion. Personally, I think that they chose the perfect idea there to have Ryu as a part of the mech. You can imagine that he's able to pick up the mech with his strength and fly off with it if you want. But it also just adds a lot of extra detail, and it makes Ryu look like he's the head of the mech, which is pretty cool. Now, I'm going to take these into different poses, and then I'll showcase the posability of these real quick, and then we'll talk about the different vehicles separately. So here's some interesting poses that I've put these mechs in. Now, in each of my original reviews, I didn't focus too much on the posability and actually showcasing what they're capable of, so this is kind of that section being done in this video. This is mainly to showcase if you wanted these mechs in cool dynamic poses, how could you get them in those poses without them totally falling over? Now, for the Core mech, this is a lot harder. The arms themselves are big and bulky, the mech is very much top-heavy, and the legs do not have knee joints, and they are very stiff and very difficult to pose in different places. Yet, I was able to get it kind of leaning over to the side, shooting with one of the drill arms there, but in order to do that, I had to use one of the drill arms here to hold the rest of the mech up. Now, it's not the best pose, and I'm sure if you didn't have it in a good spot where it would be sturdy and not get knocked over, this probably would fall over even there, so this one's not the best for posing in different poses, but I did want to show you that you can get poses out of it. Now, this newer one is interesting because the legs aren't as long and the feet are a lot bigger in this version of this mech, so it's a lot harder for you to find poses for the legs. However, the arms come with elbow joints that actually work really well, and I decided to go for a Naruto-style running pose because I thought that would be pretty funny to try out, and it does work. Now, Ryu's wings can also move around while on the mech too, and I feel like that adds a very interesting look to any style of posing, because you can pose those along with all the other joints. Additionally, this one doesn't seem to have as much problems falling over once it's posed, so that's pretty good as well. The bigger feet on this mech and the posability of the feet make it very much easier to pose this thing. So overall, I'm going to have to say the newer one is better for posing in all of the different forms for this. But you can also get these mechs in a sort of sitting pose, so let's try that next. Well, I thought this would be cool in concept, but in actuality, this just kind of looks a little too silly. But both mechs do have the ability to sit down on their legs, or at least part of their legs in most cases. For the newer mech here, you can see that the wheels kind of just act like they're in car mode, which basically means you could roll this around as if it's in car mode, even though it's really just the mech put together just sitting, which is kind of silly. But it does look pretty good, and it still has like all the bulk to it. And additionally, I've moved Ryu's wings around once again to make it look like they're in a folded down position, which is pretty cool. Now, with the Core Combo Mech here, it's a little bit more silly because the legs from the Fire Mech section are actually technically in a sitting position, as well as the fact that there's the Zane vehicle legs being used as legs when it's sitting. So it kind of just looks a little silly, but it does look like it actually is sitting a little bit, so that does its job. And overall, I'd have to say that I'm not going to give points of which mech sits best, because this is just silly. So let's move on to each of the individual sections of the vehicles, so that we can compare those and see how those work. So here we have both the vehicles used as the legs on the mechs, and this is a thing that I'll have to state before going into any of these, and that is that the Core Mech makes use of making their vehicles very unique, and actually makes their vehicles feel like they fit the characters that are in said vehicles, whereas the new mech just feels like there are a bunch of generic vehicles with Zane and Ryu just added on top of it. So in most cases, you'll see that the points go to the original Core Mechs as opposed to the new Zane's Ultra Combo Mech. But anyway, let's take a look at these in comparison. So, despite the fact that these are both legs, they do two completely different styles of vehicles. Zane's is more of a tank build, I guess to be kind of inspired by his mech from the LEGO Ninjago movie sets, but also it does kind of fit Zane because it does also look like it's not just a tank, but also kind of looks like it could be a snowplow with these little plow pieces in front. And therefore, it kind of feels like it fits Zane perfectly. And then over here, on comparison, we have a Samurai X car for Pixel. Now, I like that Pixel's getting something as a Samurai X vehicle, but I would have preferred for Pixel to be like a mech add-on to said larger mech instead of it just being like a car, because, to be honest, if you look at the front of this, it really shows that it's trying to be a combiner model instead of just being a basic car. But if you look away from that, it does look pretty good, and I like the color scheme they're going with. It really fits Pixel's color scheme pretty much perfectly. So overall, both of these are good builds alone for the legs, but I believe that in creativity from that kind of a point here, Zane definitely takes the win with his little ice tank slash plow sort of vehicle. Now, let's move up to the torso section of the vehicle. So here's both torso builds. Now, for Zane's Ultra Combo Mech, I'm going with the smaller Zane figure because it's really the only thing closest to the middle of the torso, and the arms and the torso on that mech are pretty much built into the same vehicle, so we're just going to have these two here for this part of the video. Now, I honestly have to give this section a tie for which one is more creative because, well, the idea of having a mech within inside a mech for Kai is pretty cool. Kai does get a lot of mechs, and you can obviously see the arms are very skinny because it's trying to fit into a mech, and it does really well for what it's trying to do, just we get a lot of Kai mechs, so I can't really give this one too many props for being unique or awesome, but the idea of being a mech inside of a mech is pretty cool. Now, the Zane over here, we don't know exactly what's going on because the actual show for Ninjago, the season that this mech shows up in, allegedly has not aired yet, and therefore we don't know exactly what the case with Zane being a larger mech-like robot is, but I think from just a standpoint of how cool this is and how creative this is, I think we need many, many more interesting ideas like this for LEGO minifigures. Instead of just giving us a minifigure, find cool ways to do brick-built things like Zane here. And the fact that he's able to fold up and fit within the core or the heart of the mech is pretty awesome. And because of that, both of these are going to be tied, making each one get a point. So let's move on to the arms next. Alright, so here are both of the vehicles used for the arms, or in the Core Mech's case, the extra set of arms, both side by side. And once again, you'll notice that Cole's vehicle here actually looks like something Cole would use. And that's the thing that I mentioned earlier about the Core Mech, is that a lot of the vehicles feel like they're meant to be used by the ninja in that section, even when the vehicles are separated. Now, of course, this does come with its drawbacks. Like the other vehicles, you'll notice that the back is pretty much very open, but you could just say that gives you room to place like Lego boulders and such. So that's kind of cool. It could be used as like a storage rack for boulders that Cole mines. But what I do like about this is it's another innovation on the front of the drill bits here. And that's that instead of just having a singular drill on front of a vehicle for Cole, we have two, and that's just cool. Because now he can drill through twice as much stuff if he wants to, and I really like how this looks as a separate vehicle. Again, you can really tell that it's a Cole vehicle just by looking at it, and that's kind of what I like about the core vehicles in the core Combo Mech. Now, that's not to say that this vehicle is bad by any means. If anything, the combination from the portion of the mech's torso and arms into this jet for Sora actually might be the most fun part of the combination for the actual newer Combo Mech. Now, I will say the color scheme feels a little too much like Pixel still with all the red in place, but the dark blue and white and gold fit with Sora's color scheme pretty well. So it does kind of feel like a Sora vehicle as well still. And the only problem that I have for it is the wings feel a little too bulky, but that's really not that much of an issue when you're considering it does have a cool combination feature. Additionally, the fact that you can literally move and hold the ship up like this to make it like a Star Wars Jedi shuttle is pretty awesome. But overall, since this vehicle doesn't quite feel like a Sora vehicle, since she really focuses on mechs and stuff otherwise compared to this, I think I'm going to have to go with the Core Mech once again for the better arm slash secondary arm build. Now, let's move on to the builds that are attached to the back and the top of said mechs. So here's the final parts of each of the mechs. Now, these make up the primary head for the mech, but also kind of make the back armor for the mech. So, these are actually pretty close in terms of like how much I like each of them and how much they contribute to being creative. But let's start with what I like about each of them, and then I'll talk about why one's better. So, just like with the rest of the vehicles in the Core Mech, this is a vehicle for Jay, and you can clearly see that based on the fact it's a jet. A lot of Jay's vehicles are airborne or jet themed, so this does feel like Jay. The color maybe could be a little bit more like Jay, but this does move and pretty much work perfectly with the other colors in the main build, so I'm not going to hold it against it here. Also, the fact that the head tucks in to be where the engine of the plane would be in the nose here is pretty awesome. The big downside with this one, actually, is the fact that you have these ball socket joints here, and they're very visible. Regardless of how you pose the wings, they're going to be visible some way. And that just doesn't really look good on its own. This definitely is a vehicle that when you put it on the mech, makes a lot more sense than it does when it's on its own. And then with Ryu over here, well, Ryu's kind of his own thing. And you'll see that I like the build they did for this, and the creativity of putting a dragon for a head on a combo mech is pretty insane. So I kind of want to see more of Ryu combining with vehicles after building it. And you'll see that the amount of details they were able to add into Ryu without making it look too much like a mech build is pretty good. The only part that really looks like it's a mech build is the white on the back, and even then, there's white on other parts of Ryu's body, so it doesn't necessarily not make sense. And it does really well because it also holds Zane's big sword accessory, so it really also doubles as a accessory holder. So I really also like these wing pieces that I mentioned before, because you can not only pose them in good ways on the mech, but in the dragon itself they pose really well too. And they're really huge. The only complaint I would have with this one is that when you're putting it on the mech, it may be a little tricky sometimes to move all of the different individual feet around to get them in a good enough position. So just keep that in mind. But overall, I'm actually going to have to give the point here to the newer combo mech, Zane's Ultra Combo Mech, because they did a really, really good job with incorporating a dragon on top of a mech, and I really like how that looks. So overall, that's the reason why I'm giving Zane's Combo Mech a point in this category. Now, let's move up to combining all of these again, and I want to discuss one more category before we give the overall look at which mech you would like. So here's a bonus section for the video right now, and this is how good do the mechs look if you're not using every single part of the mech. Because both of these mechs actually have like a hidden feature where you don't need to use all the components of a mech to make it look good as a mech. So for the core mech, we have here Kai's mech with Cole's Earth Driller arms attached to it, but without the extra legs or the head. So you basically get this ridiculous four-armed, almost wrestling guy looking mech, which is pretty funny. So this does work as another build, and you can still pose it pretty much the same way as you could pose the original mech, but maybe a little better, since the legs actually can pose a little bit better on the base Kai mech than with the other two vehicles. But this also gives you the bonus of having two vehicles to play with on the side with a combo mech build. And this newer mech build does something similar. It might not be as pretty in the middle of the section without anything there, but you could have Zane and Ryu off on their own thing, and have Pixel and Sora working together on their sections of the mech, because it does still work. You could imagine that the actual heart of the mech is just that printed piece that's been sitting in the mech the whole time. So it does kind of work really cool like that, and it gives you the opportunity to have two other characters on the side as well. So this is just another little fun thing that I figured I'd mention you should do with these, because they do work really well. It would be even cooler if you could combine them with each other, like both sets combining with each other. But sadly, you cannot put, say, Kai's mech together with the main arm build from the Zane's Ultra Combiner mech. So, you know, there's obviously some wishes that I have that could still work for this, but it is pretty cool to see that they've incorporated this for both mechs, where you don't have to use every part of the mech, and you can only use certain pieces of it and leave the others as vehicles or just creatures, or I guess Zane as themselves, which is pretty cool. Now, overall, what are my thoughts on these two mechs? Which one is better, and which one should you buy? Now, if you're looking specifically for the amount of play value these come in as a set, you probably want to go for the original core mech, because each vehicle feels like they fit each character individually better than with the newer mech. But also, you got to remember that even though we're not necessarily counting the side builds or villain builds, you do get a side build and a villain for that set as well. So that does kind of count into this section. But with this other version of the mech, you do get a lot more fun ways to transform the mech into different things. I think it looks a lot more cohesive when it's all put together. and it's a pretty good display model and much more easy to play with as a combo mech than the core one. So in the end, it's really up to what you want, but I personally am going to stick with saying that the core mech is my favorite, aside from the fact that Ryu is in the new mech, but I might do a video just reviewing all the Ryu sets out so far on their own, because that's a whole nother topic. If I was just talking about Ryu, the new mech totally would have won. But in the end, it's up to what you want to talk about and what you want to get. Both these mechs retailed for pretty much the same price when they first came out. Albeit the core mech did have a price increase a little bit halfway through its runtime, but that's okay because you could still find it used in good condition on the aftermarket for pretty decent prices. And of course, it's really up to you, but I do want to say I love these combo mech ideas LEGO's been pushing out. And later this week, we're actually going to be taking a look at my attempts to create my own custom combiner mech, so stay tuned for that video. But in the meantime, check out some of my other videos. I've got plenty of other good ones on the channel right now, and I hope you all have a great day.